necessarily want to do stuff on their own computer, you can always go to Brady and Anna. And if you forget who Anna and Brady are, I remember it. So you can just come to me. Okay. So let's plan to start with a brief presentation. And I wanted to catch you up on where Lana and Hannah have been since we last talked to them. So the last time we talked about Lana and Hannah, if you all recall, just like there was a story with Lana and Hannah where Lana and Hannah were working with old-fashioned ink, and they were bringing it up to speed with technology and creating AI models. And then let me share with you where they have been since then. Everybody online good as far as sharing the screen? I didn't share my screen. So once upon a time, there was a city, and some of you are from that city or live in that city currently, and maybe have even driven from that city today, where it's one of the fastest growing cities in the US. Over 100 people move there daily, every day. And after Wall Street, it's the largest finance center. And as a result, it has a university, and that university is located in one of those cities, because when there's a bunch of industry and when there's a lot of data, especially finance data, think like finance stock, there's a need for university to support those industries. And so as a result, that university has a very large data science program and is a big research university, and has even recently opened up a sports analytics department to support the growing industry in sports, because there's a lot of sports analytics, as I know Tad knows a lot about, or Chuck and others. And at that university, there's Hannah studying there, and she's studying data science at the university, and she happens to be the president of the data science associations. As with at universities, there's often student associations, and I know Brady and Charles have been part of those associations as well. And maybe some of you all have been part of associations along the way. And so as a student, she gets to know about all these sorts of events, and the university was putting on a data science conference for professionals and students. And as she was walking around campus, she ended up seeing the poster, and she knew who to tap to be able to speak at the conference. And so she ended up reaching out to Lana, and Lana has had a career across technologies and is working on AI technologies. And so Hannah ended up talking to her. So Lana looked over the conference details, and while Lana's experience in security compliance, all the basics that you would see in computer science, she also saw that there's a new topic that's emerging tech, and that would be agentic AI. And that is a topic that's a hot topic this year. And so she ended up creating a proposal and submitted it to speak there. And so 3 weeks later, 3 weeks passes, and Lana was selected to be able to speak at the conference at the university. And the goal of that presentation at the time was to be able to present on agentic AI and look at what agentic AI is, how can it change the world going forward? How can it streamline workflows? How can it really change society? Because often society is changed by tech. So if you just look at some simple examples, 100,000 years ago, people were doing different things than they're doing today. And so as they keep inventing new and new things, society changes. You can even look at simple things like washing machines. Like people didn't have washing machines many years ago. People didn't have electricity, so they lived different lives. And so as new tech emerges, new tech gets introduced, society changes along with it, because all of a sudden people have different jobs, different roles. Maybe some of the time that they spend doing things manually, they no longer have to do manually. So how many of you use a dishwasher? But you may still also sometimes hand wash some special dishes. So that doesn't mean that we're incapable of washing dishes and hand washing them, but we still often leverage the dishwasher and the new technology that comes with it. And as a result, our time is freed up to maybe read more books or do other things that we want to do, scroll on Instagram, or, whatever you may want to do. Spend time outside, watch a movie, play sports, do sports analytics, all sorts of stuff. And so as we start seeing AI and agentic AI come into society, you can start seeing how all of a sudden society may be changing as a result. And that can be distressing to some people because it is a change that they didn't necessarily ask for, but it's coming regardless of whether they like it or not. So sometimes unwelcome changes are not necessarily desired. But at the same time, I do think people eventually will adjust. And as you start thinking about how AI has become pervasive in people's lives, it is ultimately start looking like the next revolution. So there was industrial revolution, and all of a sudden there were fewer farmers. And people lost some jobs for sure doing farming manually, but a lot of new jobs were created as a result. And so that's what we're starting to see with AI technologies and agentic AI now, and will continue seeing into the future. And so we were ultimately trying to figure out how to start presenting agentic AI and what does the society may look like in the future as we start seeing changes. But how do you do that if you don't know what agentic AI is? It is very latest technology, and some of the definitions are still being defined. So as you can imagine, there's lots of people arguing about what the definitions of different words are. And so what do we start with? We start looking at how others define agentic AI or AI agents. And you start seeing where even AI agents and agentic AI are at this point used interchangeably. But there may be different, in a year, we may start seeing how it all ends up shaking out. So IBM, for example, refers to an AI agent as, I'll read the definition. An AI agent refers to a system or program that is capable of anonymously performing tasks on behalf of a user or another system by designing its workflows and utilizing available tools. And so some of these definitions may make a lot of sense to different people, depending on how familiar you are with the technology or not. And Lana's definition is more simplified, where it's simply think of agentic AI as an assistant who can complete your goals independently. So you set out a goal and they go off and perform the goal. They may come in to check with you, but largely they do it on their own. So you can treat it as your assistant. And also, when I do talk about an assistant, keep in mind, sometimes when we are specifically in technology, sometimes we think of technology as a phone, as a computer. But I don't want you to think about an assistant as just a computer or as just a phone, because there's a lot of work being done on humanoids. And humanoids are basically robots that walk like humans and act like humans and move like humans. So there's video of humanoids breakdancing better than like the Australian breakdancer at the Olympics at this point. And we can't even watch that video, but they can crawl, they can walk, they can run. And so I don't know what's going to happen in the future, but at the same time, with what they're doing, you start seeing how what can happen is that all of a sudden you start having people walk around that aren't people, that are in fact robots. And so just like we didn't think phones would be coming, and all of a sudden if you ask a person in the 80s, would everybody have a computer in their hand, they would look at you like you're crazy. But here we are, and people have, smart watches and smart rings and all that sort of stuff. So all of a sudden you may start having humanoids walk around. And what does that future look like when you do start having humanoids walk around who are capable of completing goals, who are capable of mowing your lawn, who are capable of taking care of your children, things like that. So we do start getting into some of the definition. What is an AI agent and agentic AI? Some of those terms still blend in a little bit because we are in the early phases of this. And a year from now, this may look completely different. But for now, the way I make a distinction between an AI agent and agentic AI is that AI agent is still a little more dependent, a little more codependent with the humans, and agentic AI does work with external system, sets its own tasks based on goals, whereas AI agent, I would say, is a little less advanced. At the same time, when we look at this presentation a year from now, it may look completely different because the future is still unwritten at this point. So when we do start looking at the underlying technology for agentic AI, so there are some of the basics, machine learning. So that's the basic of AI. I know like the, techie people always knew that AI is more than just ChatGPT, but in the popular world, everybody's like, ChatGPT, that's AI. And what they didn't realize that AI's been there the whole time, they just maybe didn't realize it. If you look at Netflix, that uses AI to provide recommendations to you as far as what may be of interest to you. If you use Instagram, if you use Facebook, if you use social media, predictive text, all of that is AI. AI is not just ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude. At the same time, a couple years ago, ChatGPT did come out and did allow access to the general public to all of these tools, which can be used and misused as is typical. And the underlying technology under ChatGPT is LLM, and that's a large language model. And what that means is that the ChatGPT, in order for it to work the way it works, it has to be trained on large amounts of data. So it's trained on like a bunch of data from the internet. That's why it's a large language model. And as it's trained, then as it's giving you the answer, it predicts what is the next word that sort of matches, that sort of makes sense. And so it's sort of predictive text, if you will, if you ever are on the phone and are seeing predictive text. That's ultimately what ChatGPT is. It's just trained on vast amounts of data on the internet. At the same time, not everything on the internet is true. And so it may be trained on things that aren't even true. And sometimes it does what we call hallucinate. And what that means is it's predicting words that like sound good or like that they think you're going to like, but aren't necessarily true. So there's some distinctions there. And then the natural language processing is some of the basic underlying technology where it just processes the language of humans and tries to understand and parse out, this person said these words, this is how I process it at the computer level and try to figure out how to answer some of these questions. So that's why when you ask ChatGPT a question, it tries to figure out what are you trying to ask for, tries to break it down, and then starts answering based on the large language model and predictions. And there's certainly like much more technical explanations, but I was trying to keep it like relatively high level there. As far as the evolution leading up to agentic AI, so first we had automation with basic rules. A lot of the rules were hard-coded, and as a result, not as flexible. And then we had AI automation that was doing more predictive learning and predictive prediction. So you can think about AI automation as, let's say, predictive chat, where if you're on a website, sometimes a chat pops up or giving you a discount based on your activity. So that would be some of the AI automation. And then we have AI agents, and agentic AI are some of the latest pieces that are coming into play. With agentic AI certainly being very new, and there's always new stuff coming out every day. Some of the latest stuff was Manus, if you've seen that, where it's an AI assistant that can complete fairly complex tasks. So if you haven't seen that, look it up and see what you can find about it. And from a market perspective, because if there was a market for it and people weren't willing to pay for it, then we wouldn't have all these software engineers and machine learning engineers and data science folks and AI folks who are able to have jobs around it. So there's lots of market around it because lots of people are looking for automation, simplification, etc. So lots of companies are in that space and are working to simplify things using the latest technologies that are becoming more accessible than ever. So while I know, Silicon Swap tends to be more tech oriented, I do think it's important to have, like mentioned, the business side of things, because if there's no business, no money coming in, you're working for free, which, may be up your speed. So if we get back to Lana and Hannah, Lana did wanted to explore the perspective of the students as well. And so she decided to work with Hannah, and maybe we'll get to hear about what the students have to say another time, because we do still want to get to the workshop. So what questions do you have based on what we just went through at the high level?
Seems like an unfortunate name.
I don't choose the names. The question, if anybody can hear, what were the names? Those are, I don't choose the names. So we'll see how it shakes up. And then there's already conflicts because, let's say, in the insurance world, agent means something else. In the FBI world or CIA world, agent also means something else. In the contact center world, agent also means something else. So you can call it like James Bond, or I don't know. And
how agentic AI knows if, for example, it's in a data, and I'm gonna say First World War started in 1939, and another person will say 1940. How the agentic AI knows which one is true to pull and present it for the users? For example, GPT, if there are two choices.
Well, so sometimes on the internet there are actually that's a really interesting question, because the question for those online is, how do you know when, like, let's say a war started? Actually, you would be surprised that the accounts differ on when war started. So for example, Second World War, according to Europe, started in 1938. According to US, it didn't start until Hawaii was attacked by the Japanese folks with Pearl Harbor. So there's actually different answers. There's not just a single source of truth. Often people talk about the truth, but what is the truth? Often it depends on the perspective of the person. So for me, this is the truth because it started in 1941 or 42, because this event was critical for me, but for other people, it started at a completely different date. So how can a generic bot can make sense out of it? I mean, it can tell you what you want to hear, and it can tell you what you want to hear, but like who's right? I feel like this is sort of like talking about a temperature. So sometimes people ask me, like, is it cold outside? I don't know. Like, it may be warm for me, it may be cold for you. Who is right? You can both be right. We know that the temperature can be measured, and we know, let's say it's 30 degrees Celsius or Fahrenheit. So we can measure that, but we can't measure how you feel. It will depend on whether you're sick, whether you're healthy. It will depend on how you're dressed. It will depend on how you're conditioned. It will actually depend on your genes too. So it's a perceived thing. So who's right? If I say it's hot and you say it's cold, who's right? So how can the bot be right, I guess?
Just to push back a little bit though, right? If I had a human assistant and I said, you know, what's the weather forecast for tomorrow? And they went to the Weather Channel and saw it was 70 degrees. And then they came back and told me it's going to be 50 degrees. Everybody would agree that that's a terrible assistant that gave me a wrong
That
answer.
is true. That is true. So that's where, if it gives you the measurement, and that's where it should give you the measurement correctly, like it's still 50 degrees Celsius, objectively, because we agree as the world that this is the unit of measurement. But when a war started, that is actually very dependent on the person you ask.
Well, I guess your example too, is getting more into like retrieval equipment generation as well, because you have an agent going out and getting information from a different source.
Well, I kind of thought that was presupposed by the question, right? That the AI has retrieved a couple of different sources, and one source is giving it one
Right.
answer, and a different one is giving it a different answer.
Yeah.
Well, what do you do there?
Rather than being baked in the model, you mean?
You're right, exactly.
Because if we wanna in the future rely on AI now, right? How will we know if the AI is choosing the correct answer, if there are more options?
So I guess my question back is like, that already happens today with humans. It already happens. If I go to Charles, he'll say, this tool is the best one. And I may say, I hate that tool. This is the worst one for me. So you already have that today. So 1 + 1, can also have different answers, depending.
Scenario, like let's imagine, right, an insurance adjuster, right? Like
Right.
right now today, we hire human beings to go out, assess a,
Mhm.
fire damage, and, the insurance company has rules for, how they come up with the number that you're owed. And if that human is doing a bad job, the insurance companies that exist today have policies to go, hey, you suck as an insurance adjuster, we're hiring you and getting rid of putting in someone else. We have ways to train them. We have ways that an insurance company can go, how is this insurance
Right.
adjuster performing against this other one? Has anybody looked at, how could we apply that to an AI insurance adjuster instead of a human?
Yeah, so that's where often, and Chuck, you may be more familiar with adjusters, but I'm more familiar with let's say the contact center. And sometimes and contact center meaning when you call for this, press 1, for this, press 2, like customer service. Often what happens is there's a calibration that happens for humans. Are these humans doing all the right things, and they get evaluated based on how they're doing? And if they're not doing well, they get trained up and their behavior gets changed, but also sometimes they get calibrated to make sure that they're all doing similar, they're all performing the task similarly, or the way the company wants them to perform it. And so in your AI scenario, all of a sudden what you're touching on, I feel like, is a world where I may not have only humans to train up and make sure they're calibrated and evaluated. I also am managing a team of AI agents that I also need to make sure that they're doing all the right things that I want, the way I want them to be done. Because different companies are going to have different requirements, And even in your insurance scenarios, different insurance companies are going to have different ways they want to handle different things, right? So if I'm, well, I don't want to like advertise like specific insurance companies, but I'm insurance company one. I want my customers to be addressed a certain way, and I may have a specific mascot, and other company may have a different insurance mascot, and I want, you know, I want my brand to be different. And so I want my agents, when they're talking to that customer, to be talking a certain way, and when they're talking to that customer, I want them to be spoken to a different way. And so I have to train them up, and then I may have to do periodic adjustments, like, are they doing what I asked them to do? And if they're not, I may have to retrain them.
Just to say that, there are more logic than emotional things. And I say that because I'm thinking about all the data that is tracked and measured, and it is typically hard to measure the emotional value that can contribute to an outcome as well. For example, I remember I was working in sales, and the data said to have these 20-minute conversations for a sales call. And I was having more 45-minute conversations, but I had a higher closing rate than the 20-minute conversation. So my output was greater than the data. So if agentic AI is following the data, does that decrease its value, or is it just a way to keep everything kind of neutral because you're removing the emotional element out of it?
Well, so if we're speaking about emotional element, there are already people who are seeing that the agents are getting anxious the way humans are, because humans train them, and often humans put in their biases and the things that they don't know, and that's how they code the system. And so we're already starting to see, you know, who knows, are we going to see like therapists for AI? I mean, like, I may need a therapist for my cat, because like my cat's having issues.
People have studied that. If you're like, I'm sure you're going to do a great job, thank you so much for your help, it'll give you a better answer than if you leave it out.
Yeah, like you're already starting to see that, and you already in some cases start seeing that, like, even the AI stops wanting to give you an answer because it says, no, I refuse to help you. But okay, but also I want you to think about that is still, it's on the computer. What about if the AI is in this robot that's like as tall as me, and you make it mad and it doesn't want to do what you're asking it to do? Like, when are we going to have the first humanoid on trial by humans for doing something that they weren't supposed to do, or we didn't want them to do, keeping in mind that humans train them, so they're putting in all of the issues that humans have into these humanoids. But then we're already stealing, and this is, you know, some of the data goes way back. Already way back, we saw that two AIs talking to another were able to create an encryption channel that humans were not able to decrypt. So they could not figure out what they were talking about. And so what that means is all of a sudden you have these bots teaming up against you, and like, what if they start creating their own government? What if they start putting you on trial for doing something that they don't want you to do? What if they start like having you work for them? And so there's predictions like we may have companies that have an AI CEO.
So would that be more like, for example, our phones are manufactured and they're held like to company standards. So with those humanoids, be the responsibility of the company that dishes them out for people to buy.
Right. Sure. But how does that help you if you the one who ends up getting hurt?
I mean, the same way a phone or a computer, you would
would go back to the company.
That's true. Ask the people that had the exploding Samsung Galaxy phone.
Right, exactly. Or ask the people who crashed in a Tesla. So, sometimes there will be things that happen, that we'll see that will be interesting, that I think will be the first people who will get to experience. So there's the future is sort of coming. And there's a lot of people that I'm seeing that are like objecting the changes. At the same time, to me, it's very sort of like finding the windmills. If you remember the Don Quixote story from Spain, like from back in, the 1600s, where guy was like fighting these like windmills, but it was fruitless. Like these things are happening whether you agree with them or not. And so the more you resist them, the harder it's probably going to be for you. So the way I see it is like, it's better to learn how to work with it and understand the technology rather than be scared of it.
Was rejected and not made in that like popular mass population.
So I don't know about that, but I can see how.
Especially in the beginning, right? I mean, sure, in the like nineties, that's when it really took off and became accessible to regular people, but before that, right, these machines came along and did replace people and kicked it out of the job in some cases.
I mean, there were all those rideshare scooters people were throwing into the river. Right? I mean, also look up the history of the word Luddite, right?
Right.
It used to be a pejorative. It was a specific social movement of people who were upset that right, the Industrial Revolution was taking away their livelihoods.
And so, how did it work out for them, I guess? So, but that's why you're all here, because you want to learn about it. And I feel like because you are learning about it, you have the most power to make it what you want it to be and make best use of it, and also maybe avoid some of the pitfalls that can come from new technology. So if you think about, let's say folks who are maybe not as technologically savvy, they may be more likely to fall prey to scams and get their money stolen, etc. And so you don't want to be that person if you can avoid it. You can't necessarily help all 8 billion people in the world to not fall prey to them. At the same time, like, you're here, you want to learn, you want to make sure that you're up to date, and that's great. And then you can help teach people that and so as a result, that's I think all you can do. So with that said, let's plan to dive into the workshop part of it, where so let me just hold on. So what we start seeing right now is in the agentic AI space, you start seeing frameworks being developed on how to create you start seeing frameworks on how to create agentic AI and how to create agents. And we will see, who wins out in that race of who's going to end up being the most popular. At the same time, there are a few that already exist today. And that's where one of the ones is AG2. And that is an open
Recording
source
in
framework that is
progress.
built on top of OpenAI. And OpenAI is, if you will, the backend or the LLM that powers ChatGPT. So most people that, are not necessarily into the tech as much, they know ChatGPT. But what is under ChatGPT, what powers ChatGPT? So that would be OpenAI. And it utilizes OpenAI and make connections to OpenAI to do some of the agentic work. And as we start looking at the different agents, you start seeing things created. And when I say things, you start seeing, you may be talking to a single agent and have help from a single agent. But what if you have, just like with people, what if, let's say I have Brady and I ask Brady for a task, but Brady can reach out to 5 other folks and can help from other folks. So that's, he would end up with a like group that can help him. And ultimately then Brady comes to me and says, I completed a goal. So what we would call that in the agent world is we would call it a swarm of agents. So that's where, let's say Brady would be the swarm leader, and then he would get a goal from me. And then Brady would realize, okay, this goal is too big for me to handle, but I know these 5 people who can help me. So if you think about it in human terms, like that is a normal thing, right? I may not be able to complete everything alone. I may need 5 other people to complete it. So I give Brady a goal. Brady goes and gets 5 of his friends. So maybe Charles and Daniela are his swarm. And then they complete the goal. So that's the same way it's currently being modeled in the agentic world, where I give a goal to the agent, to the main agent, who in this case is Brady. And then Brady goes and reaches out to his other agents and communicates with them to achieve the goal. And so Brady and Anna are the power users, so they have this working on their computer. So if you have trouble seeing, you can always like go look at their screen as well. And I may have to figure out how to, you know, get it larger. Oh, and I'm not sharing my screen, so that would help. Did I? So, so I was hoping to go through it first a little bit before I give everybody access. I'm currently struggling with my Zoom. Can you? I don't know. I'm trying to share my screen on Zoom, but oh, that's where it is. Yeah, well, so yeah, so we're using AG2. We're starting with AG2 because that is the simplest for everybody to get going. And so I just want to mention a few things. So that's where you do have to install some packages at first. So this is a Jupyter notebook, FY, so you will need a Google account in order to run it. And if you don't have a Google account, or if you don't want to run it, you can just talk to Brady, talk to Anna, look at their computer. They already know how to run it, etc. So you do not even have to run it personally. And you can also watch my screen as well, but you'll be able to run it as well. But I just wanted to mention a few things as we go. So the way Jupyter Notebook works, it already has loaded all the Python environments, etc. So what you can start doing is like run some of the commands and it will install the required packages. And as one of the packages is also AG2 from OpenAI, so you have to install that as well. And then, so this is where it gets interesting. So because it leverages OpenAI, so I ended up creating my token for my OpenAI account that is preloaded with some money. So if any of you go nuts and use up all the money, it's not gonna work, okay? So that's what I wanted to mention before everybody starts clicking around like a maniac. It is preloaded. There's not that, at the same time, like when you run it even a few times, sometimes I've seen it like cost like 20 cents, 30 cents, etc. But you know, in other workshops, I may have seen other users where they just like start clicking and they're like, and I'm like, what are you doing? They're like, I'm trying to break stuff. Okay, maybe like don't try to do that. Maybe don't try to break stuff today. Okay. Because what you will do is like you'll use up all the money that I preloaded and it won't work for anybody. So that's what I wanted to mention before everybody starts.
Okay, if I use it for my big.
Exactly. So those are just some of the things I wanted to mention before I start sharing it with everybody. And I believe Brady, you may be an editor, and Anna, you may be an editor on this notebook. Oh, you don't have access. Okay, well, great. So you are an editor. I'm hoping that also means you can share it with others.
Sure about it.
You don't? Awesome. And so that's where your power user may be able to share it with you. So you just come up to them and they'll be able to share it with you. And so, or put your email in the chat and I will. Oh, you can also put it in the chat if you're on the Zoom, and then Brady and Anna will like plug you in. Okay, Mark, you're on the Zoom?
Yeah.
Would you be able to go help Anna to get everybody access, please?
Is there a link in Zoom?
So people will be, so Anna will just need the email addresses in the Zoom. And maybe I'll like unplug and just put everybody's. Okay, so if you want access, can you please put it into the Zoom? And so I have Brady. I only have Jamie's old email address. Yep. Okay, so I got 3 out of the, yeah. And I'm getting Jamie. And I'm getting Mark. So I think everybody who wanted to has access. Charles, do you, well, maybe you didn't want access, which is fine.
No,
Did you end up getting,
back out and right.
You can give me your email, just
so I got Nicholas, Uh-huh. Mm-hmm.
You know, I thought. But then you say,
Yes, ma'am. Is there an unofficial link circulating? So this is the official link to the collab notebook. I did get Andrew. Andrew, are you in?
James,
I got Jamie.
sir.
I got Sarah. So at this point, everybody who wants to should have access to it. So do you? I did. Anna, can you make sure Iana has access? I thought I added you. Maybe I added you. I thought I did it correctly, I thought. And so keep in mind, the Jupyter notebook does have the key to my OpenAI account. And so in a real world, you would treat that API key as a password. So I'm giving you the password to my account. At the same time, I am sure this is not, the first time this has happened or last time this has happened, but OpenAI and others, vendors, they do allow you to preload the account with a certain amount of money and do not allow you to like load it up. So it's more of a debit card rather than a credit card. So I do have a limit in there. So at the same time, if you're in a real work scenario, you probably shouldn't be passing that key around of your company. So I just want to mention that like we're sort of doing something like a little bit out of compliance here, but it is a workshop and there's like preloaded or only a certain amount. At the same time, don't share your company's key anywhere because that is a password. So when you scroll down to the line where it says like run your first agent, so what happens is you have to run the LLM configuration. You have to select the model of like GPT-4o, which if you use ChatGPT, you may have seen that. And there's the API key. And then you run your first agent. And in this case, the agent is an assistant. That's what we determine. We call the agent an assistant. And then we are asking the assistant to plot a chart of NVIDIA and Tesla stock price change year to date. And so we're simply giving a prompt the same way you would give ChatGPT a prompt, but we're doing it programmatically. So it's a little bit different from that standpoint. And so that's where you should be able to click on it and you should be able to get an answer with your agent. And if your stuff has ran successfully, you will see like a little check mark. And so, yep. So I ran it, and what's happening now is that you can see that the assistant is saying these words to the user proxy. It says to plot a chart, we'll follow these steps. We'll collect the stock data, we'll plot the data, and here's the code to accomplish this. And it gave me Python code to accomplish this, and it created code that would plot the chart that I asked for. So what it did, I gave my agent a task, and it broke down the goal into task and told me how it was going to execute it and gave me the answer. So that's the very, like, and obviously that's a very, very simple agent. But at this point, we saw our first agent. And so has anybody else been able to get that far and run it? Okay. So, yes, Nick.
So is the user proxy kind of like a command from the human to the assistant?
So in this case, yeah, so that's where, so to be fair, I don't exactly know what the user proxy does in this particular scenario. That does seem like the user proxy agent seems like an AG2 thing. It's part of the framework for AG2, and I don't quite know. So keep in mind, this is new. I'm sure you can find out a lot more details, but I don't fully know. But it sort of seems like it has some, this is an example that they just gave on the website. So I was just going with it personally. But it gave me the answer relatively, and I'm happy. So
I checked the docs, it looks like one of the AI agents.
it kind of seems like another one of the AI agents because it talked to the other, it talked to the assistant.
It just thinks it's talking to another assistant, but really it's just, you're just puppeting it to what you as the user want.
So the part that I don't understand, and we'll get to it, and so the second, so that was the first agent that was like the simplest agent. But then we start getting into, and this is how AG2 defines it. They have different agent concepts. So there's the conversable agents where they talk to one another. And it's not Brady talking to Charles, but it's like an agent talking to another agent. And you may give, just like in a movie, you may cast Brady into a certain role and Charles into a certain role and give them tasks, or at a company. Each person may have different role in the department and may do different things. So conversable agent is one thing, human in the loop, where you are not simply relying on, so where Daniela maybe is the human and Brady and Charles are the agents. And so Daniela gives the goal, but she says, okay, complete the goal, but maybe check with me halfway through to see, I want to check if you're on the right path. So that would be called human in the loop, where you're not letting the agents fully complete the task, but they have to come to you and then. But if you think about it, it's like really no different to how we already work today with humans. So if you are already working with humans today, you say, do this thing, but before you proceed on this thing, check with me first. We already do that today. That's like pretty standard. So it's the same concept with the AI agent. So you do have to start thinking of agents as like another human, as a humanoid. It's just another person that can help you. And that's where you can start orchestrating multiple agents. So that's where we start calling them swarms of agents, where you sort of what I was talking about. I give Brady the task and he's the main agent, but he creates a whole swarm of agents that are able to complete a more complex task, because Daniela is very good at finance, Charles is very good at coding, and so as a result, Brady ends up like a one-man company because he has all these agents doing all these like subtasks for him. And then you can do more advanced stuff where you can start reaching out to external systems, and a lot of it's still being developed, but you start seeing beginnings of that already. So if you start creating a conversable agent, it's you define a role and you say, in this case, you create an AI agent, you give it a name, you can call it assistant, but you can call it anything you want. You can give it names. You can call, this is Daniela. And you are an assistant that responds concisely. You give it some instructions of what their jobs and responsibilities are, what you want them to do. And then this is fact checker. Maybe that's Charles. And he's a fact checking assistant. But again, you can give it anything, any data you want. And then you give it a message. And in this case, what is AG2? Is the message. But Charles, did you want anything else? Do you want me to change it to anything else? what is the meaning of life? Oh, exactly. When did World War II start? Perfect. And so we're able to run it. And ideally, if all goes well, we'll start seeing some results. And if you see the max turns equals 2, so that would be like how many conversations I'm able to have between the two agents. So if you're like a regular human, some people speak more, some people speak less. In this case, because you're the manager of the agents, you say you can only talk 2 turns. You can't just be talking for 2 hours about nothing. But again, they don't have to listen to you at some point, because at some point they may be smarter than you and they don't have to do anything you say. So this is just what is available today. And it's still thinking on my side. Has anybody been able to get a conversable agent to run?
It worked for me. It just told me 2 + 2 is 4, and I said, that sounds okay, and then it's done.
Oh, did you do the human in the loop?
Oh, yeah, I'm on the human.
Yeah, so Charles is further along.
Yeah, that wasn't, well, it didn't interact with me, it just got to the end.
Right, it's 2 agents talking to one another.
Funnily enough, it doesn't seem to know about the library that it's implementing. Right, it told me it could be aircraft grade 2, a video game. chemistry.
Yeah, the AG2. So do you want to do the World War II, since mine is struggling a little bit?
Is it a dietary supplement too? I feel like I've seen that.
Oh, that's a good one. That's AG1, yeah, AG1. I mean, there's probably one called AG2 now. Maybe it's the knockoff you buy on Amazon.
So I'm not sure why mine isn't working right now. I've seen it happen and I do not know. That's what sometimes happens with me with like collab notebooks. I've seen it happen.
It says, does the fact checker, the assistant says to the fact checker, when did World War II start? And it's definitely not unsure at all. The fact checker very authoritatively says it began on September 1st, 1939 in Germany into Poland. And then the assistant says back to the fact checker, that's correct, and then repeats the message back to it. And then the fact checker replies again with the same message it said the first time.
Okay, I hear you and I agree. But Danielka, she drove from Greenville, and when you drive from Greenville to Columbia, okay, there are these like signs on the highway that tell you about all the wars the US has like been in. And there's the Vietnam War and the World War I, World War II. World War II is like 41 or 42.
I mean, it definitely depends how you're counting, right? I mean, you could make an argument that it started in what, 1918 with the signing of the Treaty of Versailles.
Exactly. So there's different answers depending on how you look at it.
But, you know, on the other, it's just a part of earlier historical events. It really started
Right.
a few tens of thousands of years ago when one monkey had a big rock and another monkey had a coconut. And he said, yeah, I sure would have had that one.
Right. Exactly. So, well, I'm not sure why my conversable agent is not working, but if any,
For me,
Ran your account prior.
it's also possible. So anyway, there's also the human in the loop. So that's where it does the 1 + 1, 2, like 1 + 1 = 2 or 2 + 2 = 4. And Charles, you can always come share your screen if you can get it to run. Okay, you want to try that? It just may, I'm not sure how that will work with the. So So the human in the loop is where I have the human to assistant. Hello. So I have the if I'm setting up the human in the loop, this is how I end up doing it. I have human to assistant saying stuff, assistant to human, and then human to assistant. So they end up talking to one another. And when you're orchestrating the multiple agents, you can end up creating a swarm. And in the swarm, you end up giving it different roles. So if you look at just the code, you don't even have to run it. You start seeing a conversable agent, and I give it a role teacher, and in the other conversable agent gets the role planner. And I tell them what their job is. So in this case, you suggest lesson topics and you create lesson plans and you review lesson plans, and they end up talking to one another.
Hopefully I'm muted. Now I want you to immediately break as soon as we try to do it online.
Okay.
That's just how it's gonna go. This in. And then. And I guess I need to share on Zoom too.
Share on Zoom.
Screen.
If you could,
Higher screen.
if you could unmute and see if you can mute.
All right, I am. Okay, there we go. Should I turn my volume up on this?
I think, yeah, I think it's fine. We're essentially not.
Okay, cool.
Switch your screen now.
Do you-
Yep, perfect.
So if you haven't been able to get the conversable agent running, Charles got it running.
Yeah, so I
Do you want to scroll up?
Oh, oops. Oh, yeah, sorry. We're on the
Because
wrong
you
one.
had the.
You could zoom in a little bit.
Hopefully, maybe that's a little too big. So here we changed it to when did World War II start?
So this is the conversable agent. If you wanna look at the conversable agent, how Charles got it running. So Danielka.
See, I got the magic touch.
So Danielka, we asked the agents, Brady. So Danielka, we asked the bots when did World War II start, because that was your question, and then we had the fact checker, and so it was determining when it did. And then the question is, like, I think your question was like, how does it determine that? But there are different answers, but this is sort of the popular answer. I feel like the popular answer wins.
Well, I think it's really interesting too, right? Because the fact checker replies back to the assistant, and then the assistant says that's correct, and then it repeats the whole thing back to the fact checker.
Yeah.
And then the fact checker repeats the whole thing again. Like, what's going on there?
Yeah, so clearly, this is still in its infancy, so there may be some.
Kind of reminds me of being in 6th grade, and the science teacher's like, what is the purpose of the mitochondria in the cell? And the first thing you do is you say the purpose of the mitochondria in the cell. It's a very important organelle, and this is its purpose, right?
What was the max turns equals to that you had underneath the question?
So how many times they can talk to one another before they stop?
And when they're talking, so the agent and the assistant are two
So you
separate?
So you asked the question that was turn 1. I answered that was turn 2. And then you answer, and like that's sort of like 2 turns, I think. It's probably questionable how they're counting it, but that, like, you talking to me and me responding back is typically would be called 1 turn. And then,
So we had 2 back and forth.
Right.
And then after the 2 back and forth, who responds to me? Does anybody respond to me, or I get the response by reading what they have said to each other?
The second one.
Okay, I read the response.
Yeah, so I'm gonna, just as an experiment, right, just to try it, just to amuse ourselves, I changed the fact checker and I said, be sure to other perspectives or ways the issue could be considered, and let's see if it gives us any of those other answers, right? Let's see, and we'll give it 3 turns just in case it comes up with something interesting. Nope, it's still very. Oh, hold on. Some historians argue it was okay. All right, they gave us some extra stuff. Wow, it's not wrapping it, so it's hard to read. Oop, oh no. Oh, I triggered the browser back button. No, come back. Oh man, now I goobered it up. Oh, there it goes. Okay. We're gonna be creative. Oh, nope, that's too big. Yes, we'll try that too. Okay, here we go. That's maybe a little easier to read. That's pretty good. I have heard of the Japanese invasion of Manchuria as one of the purported causes. I don't know about the Italy one off the top of my head. And then it looks like the assistant said the same thing back to it. It's repeated itself. And the fact checker repeated it again. Okay, so I guess I didn't need to go to rounds equals 3 because it just kept saying the same thing back and forth. And then confidence interval. Yes, somebody asked me to change that. Let me try that. Include an estimate of how confident you are in each possible. But of course, right, remember, this is a language model, so it's going to kind of just make something up. Like this is not going to be super. There's not going to be any methodology here, right? It's just going to come up with something it thinks you're going to sound good. You're going to think it sound good, right? Cool, let's try it. I don't know why mine works and apparently the rest don't. Let's see what we got. Okay, hold on. Let's see. I'll copy this into the other window so that we can read it.
And so some of you, or the ones I have addressed this for, you should have also received an email to a Word document or Google Drive document that may have additional information in there as far as Anthropic, which you can always do some of that on your own time, or I'll also share some of it and you can follow along, because I know some people are more advanced and are maybe ready to proceed. So you should be seeing that. So if you scroll down to the Anthropic version, so keep in mind there's also the Anthropic API key, which is also preloaded. So it's not preloaded with a ton of money. All I'm saying is if you smash the button, you may end up making it so that nobody else can do stuff. At the same time, if you press it let's say 10 times, it's probably 20 cents. So you'd have to. And when it stops working, you can always put in your own key and preload. The minimum is $5. So
It's pretty well. I never did Anthropic, but OpenAI is pretty easy to set up. So.
And you can also use some open source stuff if you want to do it.
I did check the AG2 docs had instructions for how to do this with Olama if you have a machine that's powerful enough to run a good model locally.
So what questions do people have at this point based on what you've seen?
Should we check is there a chat for the, is there a Zoom chat I should be looking at? Looks like there's nothing in there. I'll check Discord too.
And so you should have, Charles, you should also have the Anthropic link to the Anthropic.
Where did you send it to me?
In the Gmail, the same way you got this.
Oh.
You got this thing going. And so I can even, we can switch and I can share if you're
I don't think that one came through yet.
You don't think so? What is your?
It's Charles.Daniels. Yep, there it is.
Okay.
Is pretty easy to like pick up.
So do you want to
Yeah, if
switch
you
up
want to
again?
take back over, it's good with me. Yeah, I was just doing this because